Welcome to All Things Crime podcast. In today's episode, we will be covering the case of Mary Bell. Mary Bell was an 11-year-old serial killer. Trigger warnings for this episode include sex work, sexual abuse, and the death of children. Mary Bell, as I said, was an 11-year-old serial killer. She was born on the 26th of May in 1957 in Newcastle, England. Her mother, Betty Bell, was a sex worker and she was only 17 years old when Mary was born. The first thing she said when Mary was born was, "Take the thing away from me." It's unknown who Mary's biological father actually is, but just under a year after Mary was born, her mother Betty married a guy named Billy Bell, and he served as a father figure to Mary, and he was actually an armed robber, a criminal, and an alcoholic. So it's safe to say that Mary didn't have the best upbringing. This is actually pretty interesting because we can clearly see how her upbringing played a part in her murders. Mary, Billy, and Betty lived in a house that was constantly filthy at a 70 White House Road in Scotswood. Back in the 60s, it was quite a poor area with a high rate of violent crimes and criminal behavior. And White House Road was a street that had a high unemployment rate. It had constant police presence because of the amount of sex work, drug activity, and domestic abuse issues. And despite all of the evident dangers for young children, Mary and all of the other kids on the street were just allowed to go out and play unsupervised from the ages of 2 and up. They would play till hours of the night, like they'd be out playing till midnight with no one there to supervise them. Betty, as mentioned, was a sex worker. Allegedly, once Mary turned 4 years old, she would pass her out to her sex work clients who would pay Betty to sexually abuse Mary. And Betty also had a bipolar disorder. She was an alcoholic. Mary had been a chronic bedwetter and was actually scared of going to bed out of fear that she might wet her bed, because when she did, Betty would rub her face in it, and sometimes she would even hang the mattress out for everyone in the neighborhood to see. Allegedly, Betty also tried to murder Mary several times. According to her family, Mary accidentally swallowed a bunch of sleeping pills and was really sick afterwards. And there was another occasion where Mary actually had to be hospitalized and have her stomach pumped, and she told the doctor that her mom had given her Smarties. There was another occasion when Mary fell out of a 2-story window, and allegedly Betty also tried to choke Mary on several occasions. She was always trying to get rid of Mary, and she even gave her away to a total stranger one time. She was going to an adoption clinic. A woman came out of an interview room and she was sobbing because they wouldn't allow her to adopt a child. So Betty pushed her daughter towards her and said, "I was taking her here to be adopted anyway. You have her," and she just left. Luckily, Betty's sister, Isa, was actually following them. So she ended up following the woman who took Mary, found out where she lived, and went and told Betty's mother. And Betty's mother told her that if you don't get Mary back within the next 2 hours, I'm calling the police. So Betty went and got Mary back, and that was when this woman had already bought Mary clothes, and she allowed Betty to keep the clothes that she had bought with Mary. And honestly, who knows? Mary might have had a better life if she had just been able to stay with this woman. Betty was constantly giving Mary away to her friends and family and acquaintances. Mary's aunt and uncle actually looked after her for the majority of the first 6 years of her life, and they even tried to adopt her, which Betty wouldn't allow, but she would still bring Mary there, say, "I can't deal with her, I can't cope with her anymore, you can look after her." And she'd still come back and pick her up despite their pleas to allow them to keep her. It was just this constant cycle of saying, "Nope, I can't deal with her, I can't deal with my own daughter," and then she'd always come back and get her again. It's like she wanted to get rid of her but also had this obsessive attachment to her. Growing up, Mary really struggled to make friends. She refused to bond with others. She was very cold and detached from everyone. And when she was 4 years old, she actually did become friends with a 5-year-old girl who lived on the same street as her. Unfortunately, though, this girl was hit and killed by a bus right in front of Mary. So you can see how that really affected her in the future. That was so incredibly traumatizing, on top of everything else that Mary was dealing with at home, all the sexual abuse, all the murderous attempts of her mother. And Mary was known at school to be a compulsive liar, a troublemaker. She had violent tendencies and she had a really bad temper. One minute she'd be fine and the next she was trying to hit kids, and all the kids were scared to play with her. She was very lonely and the other kids teased her. She was known to hit and kick and punch and grab other kids by the throat. So this was just a brief overview about Mary Bell's childhood and her childhood trauma. In the future, she'd go on to strangle people, go on to choke people, shove sand down their throats, and she also killed 2 people at the age of 11. I hope you've gained a deeper understanding about Mary Bell's childhood trauma and how that affected other people around her.